Okay, everybody, class is apparently in session because, I'm back at my favorite place in the world, school, at this desk. Ashley just wanted to re-traumatize me this morning with, sitting here, but I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Thank you for coming to our event, and of course, thank you for running for office and putting yourselves out there. I think just to begin, I kind of want to, let the audience and people who are going to be watching online sort of get to know you guys a little bit more, to talk about your experiences and what brought you here and sort of how that led you to, wanting to run for office. So, I guess I'll start with Desiré. You've worked as an educator for a number of years, including here in Waianae. What do you think has worked and what hasn't in our public school system?
So thanks for starting with me, and thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Desiré, by the way, Desiré DeSoto. And yes, I have worked in the schools for the last 28 years. It's been nice to be back here. It's been 26, I worked here 26 years. For the last 2 years, I've been at the elementary. And from what you just said here, this was the impetus of me running, is I feel like the need is already starting in the elementary, but yet our services are disproportionately in the high school, the older kids. So I definitely see a need for more services and more support in the elementary. In my time in the high school, I got to work with kids who could communicate well with me. We could talk story, and it's hard to victimize them. They can speak for themselves. As far as working in the elementary schools, that is truly where the trauma is happening. And for example, there was only one of me for 450 students. There was one of me. And I was doing the work of 3 people, burnt out, exhausted. It definitely has taken away the quality of my life, watching what's happening from the bottom. And we need to get more resources in the elementary. I can tell you that right now.
Chris, as a business owner over here, what are some of the challenges you face as a business owner? How does that sort of inform what you would do if you win office?
So as a business owner, one thing I've noticed is the lack of labor force. So there's so much work out there, but there's so much unqualified people. The resources we have out here in Waianae is so limited, and our people don't have access to them. We need more resources. We need more empowerment for the people so they can actively be a part of the workforce. The high cost of living doesn't allow people to travel into town because of fuel, because of insurances. There's so many different factors that prevent our people getting ahead of it.
And Tiana, you said that you're running because of inequities that you've seen in the educational system here. You're raising your children, right, here in the islands. What has their experience been in school? And I'm curious to know, as a mother, how does that inform what you do in office?
So as a mother, that's how I started this journey and this position to advocate for the community, for my kids. So there's a huge disconnect in our government, in legislation, and our people. So there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of things available to us, but we don't know about it, right? And so there's that piece, but also there's a disconnect in communication just amongst the people and our school system. So we no longer allow parents to come in and shadow or volunteer in our school system. And I remember growing up in Lehoku Elementary, and that was such an important and vital piece to our growth, is our family's involvement in our education. So we had coffee hours, we had all these activities that we could do as a school. And I'm proud to say that I've been able to work closely with our schools to see how we can engage more as parents, and not as a leader or anything, but just right before them, like, I'm the same as you right now in this level. How can I help you? How can I help the rest of the kids in this school? And primarily, we already know of the recent incident. It's definitely heavy for me because it affected my son, the stabbing at Makaha Elementary. And as I was getting ready to go pick up my child, I live right there, that's why, and I just heard this chaos happening and sirens coming in. And so I was literally waiting for shooter. I was waiting for them to call shooter because I worked in the school systems as a health school nurse. And when I was trying to analyze the situation to see if it was safe for me to go in, all I saw was teachers running around and the school bell rang. And when we finally got to our kids, the first thing our children said was, someone got stabbed in the neck. I don't know how they knew the whole story because it happened in the classroom. But that news spread across the school, and my son didn't go to school for 2 weeks because just 2 weeks before that, he had a slight bullying incident that he was affected by. And I went to the school and asked, how can we advocate? How can we be of support to the school to help with this? Because we understand that a lot of these bullying cases comes from single-family homes, and I am the only present parent for my children. And so when I look and reflect on those things, well, I have the support that I need from whether it's the community or my ohana, and I appreciate that so much. And so how can I be that support to the next family and the next family? So when we talk about bringing back this village mentality, the thing is that subconsciously it's already there. We already have the aloha that's in us, but how do we bring that out? And by bringing that out is, how do we work together? Yeah, how do we kokua each other? Because all the answers of all the problems that we're seeing is right here in our moku, is right here amongst our people. So connecting our people together, and yes, we might have different views, different values, but if we really look at the end result and the end goal, all our values and our ike leads to the same goal and purpose, and that's living a purposeful life. So how do we start with our keiki from younger ages to figure out what is our purpose and what do we want to do? Not wait till we're high school and we have all these job opportunities. So the last 2 years, the schools implemented CTE programs where they can go every semester. They'll change what career pathway they wanna go into, whether it's farming, comedy. And so it's amazing that the school system, I'm grateful. The Board of Education came out to our community and listened to us, the parents, and took back what we were asking, and they started implementing it. So I'm in a hopeful place, an optimistic place that the school system is hearing, and so is our government officials. And sometimes in those rooms, in those spaces, we definitely feel like we're ignored. And I just want to say, Lahui, we got to stand together because that's the only way forward. That's the only way, is us coming together and speaking our voices, because our visions are the same, is very much alike.
We'll circle back to the CTE program when I ask you all about education. But turning to Philip, you've worked all over the planet. What sorts of things do other countries or other states do that you think Hawaii could benefit from?
Man, that's a good question. I've been to Ecuador, El Salvador, a lot of around South America, as well as just recently to the East Coast. And, there's things I looked into. How were they dealing with their homeless program? Because it was very interesting to go around New York and seeing homeless on only specific streets. And I noticed that. I even seen that when I was in Louisiana years ago, that the homeless population went from every other street, and then the middle class went from every other street. What can we do in Hawaii that they are doing is be transparent. We have a lot of funds that is coming into our programs, but the transparency of what these funds are actually doing, who they're actually benefiting, is not available for us to see. And when we ask questions to the programs that are running, who are dealing with these patients, and ask them, they says, "Oh, I'm sorry, HIPAA prevents me from acknowledging what we are doing." So they hide behind these specific laws to prevent the public from knowing what is happening. However, it's a need to know. It is public funds, and it's always a need to know. If it is affecting your community, public funds is being utilized for programs in our community, especially nonprofits. It's always about the need to know, and that can bypass any type of law that is out there. And we don't need to know names. We just need to know, what are you doing with your clients? Where are they? How are they benefiting? Which one is succeeding? Which one is failing? And if they're failing and we still need more support, what do we need to support that? And that has not been resonated to our community. And in fact, it has been doubled. Waianae, but we fought for overdevelopment. And because we fought for overdevelopment and bringing in higher end houses and communities up in the Makaha Valley, they said, okay, well, let's start putting in homeless projects into our program. And that is what we have to be very careful for, because they did that in San Diego, they did that in Belize, what they did was they put a lot of drug dealing, a lot of violence, a lot of criminals into an area, and then a single person we call Angel to come out and invest into our community. And now he invests into our community, and now our community itself, the members of our community, our residents of our community, can no longer afford it. Today we call that gentrification. And I've seen that around. I've seen that even with San Diego. San Diego, we went from 0 to $1 million condos back to now going back to 0 again, where a lot of crime is happening in there again. So we don't want to see that. We want to be able to control our community. We want the voices of our community to be heard, and we need that. We need that true transparency. If government is going to be providing support and income to our programs, then provide transparency with that so the people can see and make decisions of their own. Thank you.
Ranson, you've been pretty open about your experiences dealing with Hawaii's criminal justice system.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest issues you've seen, and what do you think we should be doing to fix some of that?
Well, you know what? For statewide and statewide, the prison system, a lot of bigger states are already catching on to this, but the prison system is actually costing the state big times amounts of money. Not just from how it's run to the people suing the system because it's so undermanaged. When the state thinks about cutting funding or cutting, just try to save money anywhere, they're going to look at the prisons first. That's usually where they start, and they start making their cuts there. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but all the food that's served in the prison is all from food banks. You don't discover that till you get in there later and you're eating all spoiled, rotten food. But that's how they feed the prisoners. They don't buy prisoners, fresh food, and fresh meals. When they say it costs, I think it's like $150 or $200 a day to house a prisoner. I'm sitting in my cell thinking, where the heck is all that $200 going to every single day? They say it costs that much. You don't even see a couple of dollars out of that $200. I think you're paying for, which water is so cheap anyway. I think you're really just paying for the bed space, which it goes in a big cycle of, that money going to other services or other, state rackets, if you like to call it, and the money just gets refunded, because where is that $200 going? Who's paying, who is the state paying $200 to? It's paying it to itself, so there's a lot of, I would say, what you would call it, racket economy tactics that's, from the 60s and 70s that don't work, it doesn't work, the prison system is actually such a mess, and, the people suing them, not just from the people, the ex-prisoners that who's actually suing the prisons, to the, just all the programs that's supposedly there for the people, and it's big money. That's alone is costing the state big money. These rehab programs, it costs the state a lot of money, and people get rich. They make their money off running these programs. They start up a program tomorrow, and they start just housing prisoners and feeding them, but they're making I think off of one house, several, 10, 20 grand a month off of the state. It's costing a lot. It's costing a lot, and it is disproportionate. The crime rating, especially with race. When you get it, it's such a mess. I don't even want to get into race bending here and stuff like that, but it is disproportionate, especially to Waianae and places all over Hawaii, which been famously low income, and those places also house, and also, provide for Hawaiian people, who is famously from these places, so it's very disproportionate, and then, it's just costing millions, if not, going up into the billions soon, it's just costing a lot of money to house these people, There's a lot better ideas, especially how to house these guys, OCCC is facing millions in lawsuits, it's ridiculous, actually, when you look at the numbers. It is so ridiculous, so that being said, yeah, there's a lot of problems with the justice system, that needs to be fixed, but it's not saying the whole justice system doesn't work, because I'm proof of that the justice system is working for me just fine right now. I may not have a home yet, but me running my online business that I've been running for years, over 10 years, I can say the justice system in that way, when you come correct, it does, it does wonders, but that being said, if you get caught in the criminal side of the justice system, it is kind of warped and whacked, you're not, it's not, Disneyland, it's not going to be Disneyland, but that's bad. That's bad for the good people who get caught up in that system and that cycle, and try to come out and live normal again, because you're going to come out different either ways. That place is, it's not meant for anybody. Jail is not for nobody.
And then Cross, you've worked for various politicians and different offices over the years. What do you think they've done well? And then if you win, what would you do different?
I think it's been different for me every single time because I've worked for an elected official in every government level. So I worked for Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard on the federal side, worked for Mayor Rick Berlangiardi on the city and county of Oahu side, and then worked for Representative Gates on the state side. And each person has had a different personality. And, I've worked twice in a legislative, sector, and then once in an executive branch sector. And so I think each person has done a good job in trying to be there as much as possible for the people. In every office I've worked in, single one of my boss was make sure the phones are being answered to the best of the ability and make sure you listen to the constituents and their concerns, and you just have to try and address them as much as possible. I think that's been a very good job in at least trying to spread out the attention that you can give, because these elected officials are just one person. They can't give their 100% undivided attention to everyone all the time. And so that's why you have to create forums in order to do so. And so Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard held, even though she may not have been there in person all the time, we held over the phone town halls. Mayor Rick Berlangiardi has been holding town halls around the island, and then Representative Gates has been holding town halls himself, whether it be in person and virtual. And I think that's what they've been doing well so far, and trying to bring real-world solutions to real-world issues. What I do think could be different is that we need to find more ways to be accessible. Like I said, we can't give everyone our 100% undivided attention, but when our time is always being taken away from meetings, it takes away time for being able to really connect with the people. And I feel like we can find more ways to be accessible. For example, in terms of testimonies, to advocate for issues. We have ways of meeting online now, and in person at the Capitol or Honolulu Public, or other office buildings around the state or county. And yet people still struggle with bandwidth issues and access to technology to be able to do that. And so I feel like if we're going to be having testimonies that or talk about issues or make decisions that impact everyone, then we really should be creating more accessible places where people can come in person, within their own community, advocate, allow for the community to organize and really show their support for how they feel and issues should be addressed. And then I think that will give a more sense of inclusivity, because people feel like they're not being heard, they're not being included in the decision-making process, and only a select few who have the time to take off of the work to testify, to have the technology accessibility to testify via online, and all of these sorts of little issues that may not be intentional, to keep people away, but still something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, this next question is for all of our panelists. This has to do with Makua Valley. The military says it no longer needs Makua for live fire training. My question to you all, and I might start with Philip because you have some experience in the military. So the question is sort of a two-parter. Should Makua stay in the hands of the military for non-live fire training? If not, what should happen with it if it's given back to the community?
That's a good question, and it's been, talked about for years prior to the expiration. At least it's still continuing. So, at my point from when it started 8 years ago in planning for giving back Makua, I believe it should be given back. Yes, they need training. However, the training that the military has available on island as well as off island is adequate without Makua. They don't need Makua. It has been established for many years that they have different areas that they train in now. Makua is such a small valley, and the training in that valley is not adequate for today's warfare. Today's warfare, we're looking at a different type of warfare as it did back then. So when we did Desert Storm and in Middle East, it was more about open space and urban warfare. Now we're going back to a new predecessor, which is China, Korea, which has been taking over New Zealand, Australia, Samoa, and a lot of other areas because governments have bought into that system and has now taken over a lot of land. So they are playing our playbook. But again, Makua does not fit in that playbook. So how should it be given back? That is the key question that I am very optimistic about because they gave back Kaho'olawe to the people. Kaho'olawe is still not accessible to the people. We don't know what happened to the millions of dollars that was put aside to clean up Kaho'olawe. So until we can actually figure something out, it needs to be both the combination between the Department of the Army and DOD, because it was a multi-service trade that used Makua Valley, and the people of Hawaii, as well as people of our community to say what happens and how it happens to ensure that it's clean. So transparency in all three of these areas need to happen.
And then same question, anyone can jump in, whoever wants to. Sure, yeah.
Definitely jump in on that. Mahalo for that question. So as a community, that this has been a ongoing topic all throughout my years of living, really. And now that I have a lot more ike and have went to our kupuna to find out the history and to know what does the documents currently state, we as legislators has no part in that. Because the documents already state and the agreement was they would use it for a certain time and return it clean by the military, it should do just that. It's in the next 5 years, this is the time that the military should be cleaning up the land so that it could be returned in 2029. There is no need for legislation or government officials to get involved because the documents already exist. Makua needs to be returned to the people, not the state, but the people. Yes, the state is in place to help steward the Aina, but the people are the ones that the plans come from. So all the ohanas and families that have been affected who have the TMK and the actual ties to that Aina, that land should be returned back to them appropriately. So even for us to say what is our idea of what that place looks like, collectively, I feel like the community has spoken and said that should be a healing space for community to go as Kanaka Maholi, which I do agree with that. But also, respectfully, we have to also seek the ike of the ohana too, because first and foremost, that was their land and their family heritage that was ripped from them way back when. So absolutely, it needs to be returned, and it needs to be, according to the contracts, it needs to be done by 2029, fully cleaned and cleared for access to be presented in 2029 when the lease ends.
Anybody?
I agree with both of them, what they said. My name is Desiré DeSoto again. My kupuna was one of the people who actually fought for Kaho'olawe and Makua. That was the understanding at the time. Once we get Kaho'olawe back, we get Makua back, and the military doesn't have a mechanism to return land, yeah? So we have to create our own task force of stakeholders to have our own plan of how we return Makua. There is no Malama Makua anymore, save Makua. It is just return Makua. It's time that Makua is returned to us, and we decide what happens to her collectively. And I think that there should be an endowment from the military that we teach our own kids how to clean. And when I say clean, they're not going in there with their hands. Like, send the drones, send these robot things that go in there. Let them do the research in how to clean the land or rehabilitate the aina. So as it comes back from the military, we do know how to clean it. And our kids will do that for us. I don't know anybody else who will clean them better than us, that cares and loves that aina as much as us. So I definitely want to see a task force of all the stakeholders. And like I said, there is no Malama Makua, Save Makua, there is only Brent Makua. Mahalo.
So I'll go next if I will. So like Philip said, and Desiree, as well as Tiana, absolutely, the cultural significance of that place should be returned. But like I've said before, I've been blessed with a burden of reality thinking. And I disagree that our children should clean it up. Like Tiana said, if it's in the documents, they should do it. However, our significant geographical location, we need the training. The military needs a training. The military has already promised that there's no more bombing. So with that being said, we can foreshadowing, we can have the military make certain promises that they will protect the native species, the native plants, the native animals that are out there. However, I do think that if the lease does get renewed, like I said at a prior meeting, the lease needs to be renewed at fair market value. Whether it's Makua, whether it's Kahuku, whether it's Big Island. It needs to be renewed at fair market value. And then each community that these parcels of land resided, that community needs to be the single most beneficiary of those monies. We could use the monies from the government, lease, and better our way of living out here. That monies could directly be poured into resources that will help our people. We could have a public-private partnership with the DoD as well as the state, as well as stakeholders out here in the community, and we could work side by side. So, do I feel that the land should be returned? Absolutely. But I also have forethought about reality, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, you know what? I just wanted to clarify a quick point as well on the prior one. Just fast guy. You know what? I'm not, a person who's not against prison and stuff like that. You do have very violent offenders who needs to be locked up. But you know what? Just another skim of the states where, that whole mess is going on. Just real fast. They say they allotted so much money to buy food for the prisoners, and that money is nowhere near feeding the prisoners. As I said, they get free food, from the food banks. But anyway, moving on to Makua, Chris got some good ideas, but my biggest concern is the national deficit. Those ideas were popular in the 70s, the 80s, especially where the military were at. Whether it was New York, California, places like that. But we're in the days of downsizing. I believe, as a Democrat as well, downsizing the national deficit is, should be one of our top priorities. As of today, Hawaii isn't, the military hub that it was, 100 years ago. We got bases in Guam now. We got bases, in the Philippines. We got bases way closer to the problem areas of the military. So-called problem areas. I being a Chinese national as well, having that nationality, I believe that U.S. and Chinese ties will actually come together. China has many assets in the United States, many people of their own in the United States, because the United States, it was and always was, for immigrants. It was a country of immigrants, and it's so sad when you hear that phrase over and over. I mean, it can get downgraded and misconstrued through the media, but you know what? This country is a country of immigrants. I had to just have a quick talk with a person, a constituency in this town, about how all Asians to other people, all Asians, they all look alike, but they got their own dialects or own way of speaking and stuff like that. I had to clarify that for, a constituency with my Caucasian races as well. When they say America is a country of immigrants, we're not all Irish, we're not all, British, my nationality is says from the German side, so there's so much different ethnics, ethnicities in America that's not just all white. Then it's not all white, there's Germans, Irish, all different mixes. So we are definitely a culture and a country of immigrants. But that being said, yeah, I mean, my stance is the same stance like many who's opposing that, because Hawaii also is facing a food crisis. Makua Valley, could be turned into rich farming land that could, help sustain this land. We gotta turn over more land to farming and stop the state racket as well of them, keep pushing back the agricultural limits and the agricultural set lands, and market that off as, housing or, city development, and stuff like that. They've been doing that lately. But a lot of land, especially in the state's hands, they shouldn't be doing that at all. I mean, the people who had the keys, the past, 20 years in Hawaii has barely been Hawaiian, yet they've been marking off, all agricultural land and setting that off, setting the limits off as housing, a city. And it's very gross because, the United States, this government, this state Hawaii government, and the Hawaii history is so complex, but this state government is run by the federal government of the United States, and they've been making a lot of shot calls lately, and selling off whole swaths of land that is actually ceded lands. So basically stolen lands that was stolen from the crown, back, 100 years ago when all this strife and mistrust was going on, and stuff like that. So it's got a kind of gross, with the state just willy-nilly just, selling land and remarking whole land sites and areas, so it's definitely a mess. But yeah, I agree, with the ones that stand against it. We should get it back because we need the land desperately for the food crises that Hawaii is facing. Can't feed everybody. That's another reality for many state institutions. They can't even feed the prisoners. They can't feed the students. So it's getting ridiculous. We are a land of growing and feeding. We've always been like that. So that's my thought on it.
I'd like to say that that's healing too. Giving us back that aina is us healing from generational trauma as well. I'll just add that in, and I'm sorry, Cross.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, Makua needs to be returned. It comes down to accountability, right? When we say we're going to do something, then do it. And if you're not going to do it, then have the decency to communicate to whoever you're working with that you're not going to do it. They said that they were going to return it. They said that they were going to clean it up. It doesn't seem like they necessarily want to. And we can't wait until 2029 to be like, okay, now we're going to start cleaning it up, because that's too late. We had the meetings, or we're continuing to have the meetings for these renewal leases. And, if we're having these meetings, I hope that there's an intention to actually listen to the people on whether or not they're going to make the decision to actually return it, because otherwise we're just wasting, everyone's time, and it's disrespectful to the people and their time to coming out to express their manao on this. And so I really do think that we need to start early. We've been advocating for a task force to be made early on with stakeholders from, many, different areas, and, hopefully not necessarily to be facilitated by the government, but to have this space open, because people have passed on, and some people who have ancestral connections to those lands may not even know that they have that. And so that type of research needs to go out first and foremost, before we can even decide on necessarily what happens to the land, because that's not fair to people that said it was going to return. And I would like to add that, lands around the world has been differently taken by the U.S. For example, lands like Makua were leased, but lands like Lulu'ole was taken by executive order, and there's no necessarily conversations about returning that either, when that is also within the same moku as Waianae. And so I think it's important, again, if we're going to hold elected officials and every that type of branch with transparency and accountability, that we also hold departments and other places with accountability and transparency as well.
This next question is also for all of the candidates, and this comes from an audience member. And audience members, if you have questions, write them down on these little cards and hand them to our civil beat staff. They'll pass them off to me. So keep the questions coming. The question is about human trafficking and crime. To all of our candidates, what are your solutions to human trafficking and drug smuggling in the island?
I'll start. So human trafficking, drug smuggling, let's throw in fireworks. There's accountabilities for everything. There's tracking for everything. But when these people get caught, the punishment needs to fit the crime. We need to send a strong message that if you're going to do something, if and when you get caught, you are going to be punished. Far too often, there's criminals getting away with a lot of things. They're getting away, they get caught, they go in, they plea bargain, and they're out. So there's ways of the criminals ducking the system. They're not getting fairly punished for the severe crimes they're doing. Now, when it comes to human trafficking, I'm a father of 4 girls and 2 boys. I am 100% against human trafficking of any nature. Unfortunately, human trafficking is just a blanket. I think we need to dive into that blanket and identify everything that it covers, because far too many people don't understand what human trafficking is. They think human trafficking is we're grabbing a girl from Indonesia and we're putting her into prostitution. That's not the only form of human trafficking. We need education in our elementaries, in our intermediates, to show what human trafficking is. Then we can battle and we can fix it. So many children out there don't know that they are a victim of human trafficking because uncle went touch me, or papa went touch me, or daddy's friend went touch me. We need education, and we need to let these victims know that it's okay to speak up. And when they do speak up, we need to believe them. And when we do investigate and we find the guilt, we need to slam them. Period. They need to be held accountable at the highest level, whether it be human trafficking, drugs, or anything else. We need our judicial system to support our police, to support our NSWs, to support our communities. We see everybody in this cafeteria today has seen or witnessed something bad in their lifetime. You know what happens? They don't have the support, they don't have the backing, and they don't have the encouragement to sit on the stand and say, yes, that's the gentleman I seen doing bad, because they're afraid. They're afraid our judicial system and or our police system is going to let that bad person go, and they're afraid of reaction. We need stronger laws to make sure the punishment fits the crime.
I agree with Chris. Desiré again. I agree with Chris. I think the issue is really convoluted too, especially when it comes to the sex trafficking. Like you said, there's so many different ranges of this, from being left at your mom's dealer's house, or your dad's dealer's house. There's that kind of stuff. And even the girls that are sex trafficked, I have worked with girls that have been, they don't realize it, and they choose that life all for money. It comes down to money, a money situation too, and poverty, and a lack of resources, a lack of opportunities. Even I feel like this with the drug smuggling and the drug dealing, even that can come to a lack of resources, a lack of opportunities. And so this is why I'm kind of a proponent of starting younger with internships, apprenticeships at younger ages to prevent this. Let them start, going out and making money to help their family, to keep them out of these street kinds of cliques, because oftentimes it's that bad group that's going to recruit you into this world. And they like to do it already when my kids are young. They'll start off with a game room or something, and next thing you know, they're in this world. So we as a community have to hui up too and call things out. I'm not afraid to call things out, for sure. As an advocate in the school system, I've had to call things out with my administrators and sometimes with my colleagues. And these are courageous conversations that we need to have with even some of our friends. you know, and call things out and let our kids know that we love them and there's other routes they can go. They don't need to do this. My girls that were in this world, they knew that it was ugly. They knew that it was wrong, but their guy would have them with drugs or with love because the parents are too busy. So this is a very complex problem that needs social workers on top of enforcement. I'm a carrot person. I like to give people carrots to go on this, but I do believe that the stick should come if you don't like the carrots. You know, then we do need that stick side to come down hard on them. But we really got to help our kids so that they know to not go down these paths. I like prevention. You know, I feel like that's the best place we can put our resources at this time, preventing and also getting to the people who are doing the bad stuff to our kids, getting them into these worlds.
Next. So human trafficking is a real big issue. I worked at Mahalo at the child adolescent program. And I got to work with kids that were aged between 4 all the way to 19 years of age back in the early 90s at that point. And I got to work with victims of sexual abuse, and I also got to work with predators. And I realized that the predators who were children were also victims of sexual abuse. And that led to more more abuse and more trafficking. And it's become more complex. We used to only look at human trafficking as an international event where it came from, we were the hub and they brought in women here and then sent them off, went to Maui and sent them off to the mainland or to be distributed. And then we got into a more complex system where it becomes family members who are now trafficking our kids. You know, whether it's for drugs, whether it's for money for rent, whether it's for a car. A lot of things are happening here. One of my best friends worked for Homeland Security. She built the program during the Super Bowl in Miami that was able to combat that. I could not do that because the information and the person you have to play online to lure this people in is not. You need to be somewhat ill-minded to be able to do that because it hurts me. I'm a parent. I have 2 kids, boy and a girl, and I have 12 grandchildren. So, my grandchildren are young, and before these never have internet and never have cell phones to communicate so easy. And now that being available makes it easier for sex traffickers to look, for victims and say, take a picture, I want that person, boom, or I want that person, and it can be done at our schools, and that's what we need to start at, is the education, letting these kids know money isn't everything. Starting it from elementary all the way up, money is not the key to success. And they believe that. And if we live by, we have to get this, we have to buy that, we got to keep up with the Jones and have the newest iPhone and newest clothing, then they're going to believe that. They're going to believe that their body that they have is a collateral to be able to get that. So we need to be able to take it back to home and show them what is important. Community-based family barbecues, hanging out with family, spending time at the beach, spending time in the mountains. Take that back, and that's what is important to family, and not the clothes we use, the shoes we wear, or the type of education we have. Public education is just as good as private education. It's a matter of what we do in our homes to educate our kids will prevent human trafficking. Thank you.
Mahalo. So, mahalo for that question. Whoever asked the question, and it was already mentioned, it's definitely a complex discussion. And so here in Hawaii, we like to tell stories, so I'm going to try and narrow that story. But I definitely want to take a different approach and give a different perspective as well. So I agree with the right charge or the right punishment to the crime. I absolutely agree with that. But I also know that in our justice system and with people that is in place, we see and we know as the people, we are considered below everybody. Yeah, so we're at the bottom supposedly when rightfully it should be turned around and the people is at the top. And so being that we are currently at the bottom and the instructions come from the top, we're suppressed in our voices. So whether it's that wrong didn't get done to me, but I was coerced to say something or I was coerced to do something against my will for the benefit of my family, or just blatantly the justice system charged somebody for wrongful doing that they never committed, that they never did, and it tore the family apart. And so I'm a heavy advocate for that, is that I want to ensure that the people in these places are doing it with a full heart and an open mind to understand the entire situation before just coming down on that person. Because you literally are ripping apart this family where it did not need to be ripped apart. They're already going through a trauma. And here you are, you hitting them while they're already down. And what you're accusing them of didn't even occur. And so that's where my heart is on that we gotta be also open to making sure that we are doing thorough investigations. I had social workers, palliative care teams there for me. And they were never there for me. As quick as the corporation went and did a different direction in the legal system, they were on their side, not mine. So for me, that's where there's so much that I hear as I go out into the community, wrongful doings in being charged. I mean, there's cases right now that's being exonerated because they weren't even the DNA that they were in prison for. Somebody died in prison taking that, and it wasn't even the right DNA. You guys, we're seeing that all too often today. And so I just want us to give a different perspective on, yes, hard on crime. I absolutely agree with that, if they committed the crime. Right now, our current justice system is you are guilty till you prove your innocence. How many of us heard in movies that you are innocent until they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty? That is not true here in Hawaii. So our justice system is already corrupted in that sense. And we have people in these places that unfortunately, when we get these positions, we put us on this pedestal. We put us, ourselves, on this supposed pedestal, or some people will call it a God complex, as if we have the power to do something. You guys, we have to remember, the power is right here. And my fingers is pointed this way because the power sits amongst all of you. It's the people that's going to make the changes that we want to see today. So getting back to the question on what is my ideas and solutions in stopping these illegal things from coming in, or allowing the human trafficking to go out from our state. I've asked this question for at least 3 years since I started getting involved in legislative matters. Why aren't we checking the containers? Oh, it's not able to be done. It's time consuming. There's no way. And criminals know. You put housing goods in the front and everything is in the back. So they can open every container, but how productive is that? So why aren't we utilizing technology to maybe scan those containers? Yeah? If there's humans in those containers, why isn't there some kind of infrared device or something to show the body heat in the containers? Because we know that's the easiest way to get any body out. I don't know how many of us may have watched Song of Freedom. I am so grateful for that movie. And my kids watched it too. As much as I'm a little bit on the teetering on the fence here about pushing it down into our younger generation, because when we think about and we strategize within the school system, what is the best way for a shooter incident? Oh, let's reenact or act out a shooter incident. Guess what we just did to the kids? We just created trauma. Now they're going to be coming to school every day, reenacting that scenario we just gave to them, that I'm going to get stolen today. Somebody going to come to the school with a gun. Yes, we want them to be aware of their surroundings, but not instill fear in them. So awareness and fear is two different things. Make them aware of our surroundings and what is the dangers that is around us, but how do we prevent that? Don't go to the bathroom by yourself. Don't go running off where I cannot see you, right? These are all the ike and the mana'o that was passed down to us from our parents. So the same parenting, again, is holding our parents accountable as well, because our parents has a lot to play in all of this. The upbringing in our homes and things like that. So illegal, another thing, it's not only containers that they're coming in from. Anybody shop at Amazon? Amazon, I'm pretty sure everybody shops at Amazon. Yeah, Ghost Guns is coming in through Amazon. You're able to order pieces of a gun through Amazon. So when we're talking about illegal things, so is that something we want to address, right? As legislation, are we going to instill or implement some kind of bill or measure to now restrict things on Amazon? Again, that's a government now is jumping into things. So I'm putting that to you guys just to put gears into place so you guys can think about solutions and ideas of what is the best foot forward for us collectively and how we can grow together and move together to solve these issues and to make sure none of our keiki is taken from our aina.
I just want to say, I apologize for the disrespect. I'm deathly afraid of cockroaches, and there was like 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah, like had like 2 or 3 running.
I didn't mean no disrespect to Tiana. I'm sorry.
Earlier when Ranson was talking, I had to whack with my
Oh,
shoe.
yeah, I've seen that thing.
Out of the drains.
I'm glad I like the crap
You get a couple of drains. Yeah. A couple of drains right behind us, so that's why.
It's Waianae, they're not scared of the light.
I like jumping down if I see it.
Yeah, the question
It's but you gotta get shoes though. How you guys were supposed to
I like
get
jumping
there?
down.
yes, so just to remind the candidates that still have left to go, it was what are your solutions to human trafficking and drug smuggling in the islands? So, Ranson.
Okay, so when somebody here, who's having a lot of experience, Tiana came up with a good point. We are in America, we are U.S. citizens. I mean, when you hear of the name and the word, the game, I mean, it covers all spectrums. I mean, I've seen people false report on people just to get them in jail. You see all types of ways and angles that people use to try and entrap people into jail. We got to be very vigilant of those stuff, just like how Tiana was saying. That's very important, because a lot of people don't have access to technologies yet, to where they could safeguard themselves from people that's wildly making accusations and stuff like that, but, got nothing to back them up, There's so much people out there, trying to scam families and stuff like that and using the law and abusing the system basically to do that. But that being said, just like how Prince was saying, people who get caught up in SOS pedophilia, as I call them, anybody who get caught up with kids, I put them in that genre because that's where they belong. If you've been to jail, you know what happens to people who's, SOS, or people who get charged for, having charges with kids and stuff like that. You know what happened to people like that, and they're very well taught after they come out. They come out, worse than others, most of the times. But people who get caught up in any kind of, kid nonsense, SOS charges, they should be, slammed. Giving somebody 20, 30 years, that's reasonable, especially when it's, defenseless kids and they, cross the line, ridiculously. They should be, pay for the crime. But also as well, with drugs, drugs is a tricky issue and a tricky topic, here in America, it's sad to say our country loves drugs, I don't know if just because it's the, how available it is, as where it's not available in poorer nations, but because we have that availability, drugs is a nuisance, it's a problem, just in everyday life. But you know what? Drugs is actually hurting the economy. I heard and don't get me wrong, I heard a lot of the arguments that come out of the drug side, the drug community. Hey, this is the stuff that's building the towers in this land and yada, yada, yada. When we're facing a $35 trillion deficit, and we got a war on drugs going on, and other people on the other side saying it's good, I mean, it's a really big, topic that, deserves more looks and more minds on it, especially in Hawaii. We had an epidemic going on for 20 years before the state of Hawaii acknowledges that, okay, yeah, Hawaii's got an ice epidemic. I mean, it's so sharp on, states like California and their cities, LA, who were admitting in the 80s, the early 80s, and it was only going on for a year or two that, okay, our city's got problems with drugs, whether it's a crack epidemic, for LA and Cali in the 80s, or, the ice epidemic, which never was talked about, but finally the state came out. I think this was in like 2007. So you're really talking almost 30 years. This state has covered up a lot of stuff, but that goes back to Hawaii's territorial history as well. A lot of the newspapers, a lot of, especially in the territorial days before statehood, I mean, so much stuff would get covered up, swept under the rug, and you won't hear nothing of it. That's how it always been, especially in Hawaii. I mean, the media will try and sweep things up and cover things up, especially if the money's telling them to do so. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people know this, and I just like to spread a little bit of more knowledge, to the people. There's, I would call it, the big three economies, which is hotels, the realtor, the people who buy and sell lands and stuff, the realtor industry in Hawaii, and then you got the third that would be, just every basic economic, like small entrepreneurs and stuff like that. That would be, I guess, would be third, but the hotel industry does have a lot of pull and a lot of say in Hawaii, and a lot of people don't really know that. They control a lot of aspects in Hawaii, not just from the media. They're first with the media because they got their lobbyists already at the media every day. They can afford to pay, to have lobbyists there anytime, something comes up, So the hotel industry is a very big player in Hawaii. They, like I said, you got the realtors and stuff like that in Hawaii. But other than that, the drugs and, a lot of, this, I've been hearing a lot about the trafficking. I mean, it's a good thing that Hawaii is still a place where, any local person or any person seeing, kids getting abducted, they would try and, help and run, and try and save them, but especially, just with all the crime that's going on, it's making, heroes a lot less. If you don't got a piece on you, you think twice about, going out and just risking your neck trying to save somebody, which, I mean, that never crossed my mind, but, I help many people within the moment, so I can't say that for myself, but there's a lot of people who would second guess, going after people these days, especially in Hawaii, with what Tiana was saying, with a lot of, these, ghost economies, basically, people making a lot of money off of them, so, I mean, and I'm not one to be against, money that's coming into our country, but like in those senses, there needs to be regulation, I would say. In other places, people need to get slammed more, so they'll definitely feel the repercussions of doing those kinds of things. And then, with drugs, it's a hard topic, but it's a topic that needs to be discussed more, especially on the national level. There are certain drugs that should have been legalized, way ago, marijuana and stuff like that. And there's some drugs that needs to be, reclassified, and other drugs that totally, be legal. But, it's definitely a problem and a topic, that's going to be facing a lot of the big Democrats and Republicans. This country has, fallen, well, not fallen necessarily, but I mean, a lot of societal changes has been happening, especially within a family unit, because of drugs, and this black marketing of the drug, the drug trade in general, But yeah,
Thank you. This is definitely a complex, or these are complex issues to talk about, and they don't have, overnight solutions. And I think this is where also the conversation of the criminal justice system versus the criminal legal system comes into play, because people don't feel like the laws that are being made are not being executed or implemented to actually target these solutions, target these issues. I do think prevention is very important. I think education is very important. We should be educating our children and being aware of, drugs and why we should not be partaking in drugs, be aware of behaviors related to human trafficking, so that we can be, maka'ai and be maka'ala to addressing those issues that they've been experiencing. And I also think part of the solution is it's a cultural change and then also a society change, right? We need to create more safe spaces where people are supported and speaking up. creating safe spaces where we actually are going to hear and address them. As a certified case manager working in the homeless field and homeless shelters along our state, I've had to work with former victims of human trafficking, and sometimes the victims, they don't want to speak out, and not because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them, but also they just want to move on with their lives. And that's the hard thing too, right? We have to respect their privacy and their trauma, and we can't come with our pre-notions of we know better. And that's why another reason why we need to invest in our social services system as well. So people have individualized support to be able to address their individualized issues. And with the judicial system, they keep saying that they're overwhelmed, and that's why some of the laws are not being executed, or that's why people may not be seeing the decisions that the judges may be making. And with that is why we need to be looking for solutions that are not, the solution isn't just throwing people into jail. We need to be able to rehabilitate, change the behavior, address the core issues of why things are happening, because human trafficking is usually associated with some other sort of crime. And the other crime may be the core issue in terms of why these people are participating in these bad behaviors. And we really need to slam on them. We need to make them know that we're not playing around. This isn't us, we're not going to slap you on the wrist for participating in these bad behaviors, because that's not okay, and we're not okay with doing that. And it's having harmful impacts in our society and our communities. So I think it's important, again, to focus on prevention, focus on rehabilitation, and then again, making sure we're being efficient with our execution and implementation of our punishments. Thank you.
So I want to ask you guys next about the legislature, because eventually one of you is going to be working there, at least one of you, who wins election. And I know a majority of this panel, I think there's 4 members who are on the Waianae neighborhood board. For those people, I'm curious, what's your interactions been like with elected officials in the time that you've been there, and also maybe just generally? And do you think, public officials, elected officials, take the neighborhood board seriously enough when they're there in the meetings?
So as far as so our elected officials, honestly, in the last 3 years, not sugarcoating anything, so there has been very low participation from our elected officials. There's usually more participation on an election year, and if anything, we don't get our elected official. We have a staff member, office manager, or session staff to give a report, but we don't necessarily always get a report. But I mean, community knows that on a regular basis, because we don't also get, even though funds are allocated for it, we also don't receive monthly legislative mailers in our mailboxes. So there's a huge disconnect as far as communication and what's happening in the legislature, and how we as a community can engage and participate in that. And as far as the neighborhood board is concerned, our community lacks participation. And I say the word lacks only because there's been some kind of broken promise, or something they thought that they could have gotten out of neighborhood board, or a solution to be resolved on neighborhood board. But that's not what the platform is for. The platform is for a space where community can come and we connect our legislative officials, or just government officials across the board, with the community. But when we don't have the participation from the elected officials, they aren't engaged with our community. Therefore, communication doesn't get across. We can send emails, no response. We can send requests, no response, and no participation. So that has been my experience. And I honestly believe that part of the participation also, because again, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, I did run in the last election. So that hindered the communication. But for me, even us sitting on this panel here, whoever goes through, as a community, if we could change our mindset and the way we think, right? As soon as we hear the word Democrat or Republican, we're like, right? Like, oh, that's who I'm against. That's who I'm against. But first, before I was anything else, I was a community member. And if we can put all those things aside and see the vision forward and work together to get what we need done, we would see a lot more, bigger and more prosperous community. So whether it's in our health, our finances, it's us building those connections and those relationships. But it doesn't mean that I have to stop at our elected officials. I had other senators and other representatives that was willing to come into our moku and help us focus in what we wanted to see forward. They're just using examples, right? Calling a deal in our meeting. And I actually want to point this out because this was on the news the other day about hunters on Oprah Winfrey's ranch in Maui, and they were prosecuted. But yet, here we are months later of a shooting that happened out here in Waianae, and I still have no response, and the community has no resolve from DLNR's department. They came, they participated in a meeting. I had to call the ombudsman office for them to participate. It wasn't even the people that was supposed to set up the meeting that set up the meeting. It was a totally separate department that participated in the meeting, and then they told me we wouldn't get the recording. So then now here I am, got to figure out the minutes. So I have the minutes that was brought, translated per AI. So anything, any of the testimony said that was in Hawaiian, says and called, blah, blah, blah. It said it's all jumbled. You're not going to understand what that testimony said because you weren't physically there, you wasn't in the discussion, and the minutes isn't going to communicate exactly what was stated. So to put that out there and falsify something as important as minutes, those are all documentations that can be utilized for track record, yeah? And so if it's an incomplete or false statement, I strongly don't believe in it being submitted as a recorded minutes. Because putting something out there that is false is very detrimental to a person and to our community. Because then now it's going to also now take away the trust that we have in the community and the trust between us and the elected official. So there has been very low communication and low participation as far as getting things done with our elected officials. We're still waiting on responses for a lot of them.
Okay, we'll go Chris and Cross and Philip.
So, can you repeat the question? Because I want to make sure I answered the question.
So it was about, in your time on the neighborhood board, what have your interactions been like with the public officials, and do you think they take you guys seriously?
So, I just want to go on record and say I am the newest member of the neighborhood board, so I'm going to speak as if I'm a community member. And the simple answer is no. And here's why. We have Pikachu sitting front and center. He videotapes everything, as well as Olelo. If you guys go on Olelo, you guys will clearly see my stats. As the community board, as the neighborhood board, we are that direct link between the community and our legislature. Now, the community can go directly to our representative and or senators, but we're supposed to be that board. And as that board, I feel the board members themselves don't even take it serious. It's a meeting once a month that I feel like everybody should be in person. Because the community wants to see body language. The community wants to see engagement. The community wants to see a lot of these things. Now, going back to that, I call out a lot of people. I've called out the board. It's on the recording. Because we're supposed to be the first representative of our community. That's why it's called the neighborhood board. People come to us with their concerns, their agreements and disagreements. People who want to build, people who want new projects, they come to the board and do their stuff. And we're supposed to take a stance. Far too often, and again, this is all in the recordings, we hear community members saying, I'm wasting my breath, I'm wasting my time. 6 months I've been saying this thing. 6 months I've been saying that. And we feel we have Kapuna coming up, and the Kapuna are saying, what you guys gonna do? How long we gotta complain? How much more people gotta die? These are actual words out of our members. So no, I don't think they take us seriously because Right now, it's a once a month meeting. Half the board members are in person, half the board members are on Zoom. Our representative doesn't even show up. Our senator doesn't show up. They may show up on Zoom from time to time or send their representative, but we want to see the people we voted. We want to see that individual. It's once a month. If we don't care to engage our community and take their seriousness at least once a month, that is why our board we have less than 50 people average. It starts out strong every night, but then it fades. We have less than 50 people. Do I think they take the board serious? No. That's the board's problem. That's the board's issue. We need to fix it as a board. We need to show other people out here we care. That's why we're sitting behind this table. What are your concerns? We need to listen and then do a 180 and convey to our legislature. This is what we want out here. We as a community are stronger than I as a person. That's what the board is. No, I don't feel people take it seriously.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to stand out when I say that. I would like to disagree. I do think public officials take it seriously. I think issues may not always be easily able to be solved and addressed. And when people come to the neighborhood board, when they come to anyone, they would like their issues to be addressed immediately. And it's not always possible. And there has been moments where testifiers that come to the neighborhood board have come and thanked people and other officials for addressing it quickly. It just depends on the type of issue that it is. I think that with many issues that comes with the system, it depends on leadership, right? So when the neighborhood board system was created, and people who it was only created within the last, within the last 50 years, even maybe 30. And people are still alive from that moment. And, currently we are working on revamping the neighborhood board system because everything is based on the neighborhood board plan and people don't always understand how the plan functions. And so we have these expectations that we place on certain systems that I think that's where the failure comes in, right? Because people make false promises, people make, false statements, and they're not careful with what they say and how they address certain issues. And so, for example, we made the rule that people should be allowed to come online. And I've attended multiple neighborhood boards throughout the city and county, and I want to say for the most part, public officials have made it a point to attend. I do understand that people get frustrated when a representative from their office, attends, and some people can't do anything about that because there are meetings that not every person can attend every single time. And so I really do think the effort is there, and I appreciate that everyone is putting in the effort too, even the community members who come out to address the issue, because if the issue is not being brought up, it will never be solved. And so everyone is just doing their best to get the job done. I do think it's the conducive behavior, it's the relationships. If you're going to come correct as much as possible, because we can't expect people to react properly all the time, and all because it may not be getting solved in the timeline that you may like. That doesn't mean that they're not trying to solve it at all. So I think it's a complex system, definitely needs to be worked on, and they are working on it right now. And so yeah, I really do think that public officials take it seriously, and I do think that they're trying as hard as they can. Thank you.
If I may, real quick, sorry, no problem. I just wanted to point out that I disagree somewhat, because people don't always want an immediate answer, because immediate answers are going to be hot-winded. They just want to be heard and be brought the answer back, maybe follow up at the next meeting. That's where we lose a lot of these people, because they'll bring an issue, and sometimes the issue won't ever get addressed. And then far too often we'll blame time, we'll blame this, we'll blame that, and say email it or write it down. And the concern is the issue never gets answered. I don't think they so much want it answered that night. They just want to be heard and then responded to with an accurate answer, not a timely one, an accurate one. Secondly, I run a business. I have 44 employees, I'm very busy, but I know I can make a meeting that's planned for the same date, the same time, every time, a month ahead. There is zero reason you cannot make that. It's the first Tuesday of every month at 6:30. You have a month to plan, a month to get all of your business in line to be able to show up. As an elected leader, that's what people truly want to see.
Sorry, Phil.
Okay, so I've been on the neighborhood board for a little over 4 years now. And I started with the neighborhood board because of Mahalo up in Makaha Valley. It was a very interesting topic that came up, right? They wanted to build a golf course and a development up there with the Chinese developers. Okay? The people who sat with Carr, who was the developer of that project, was Miley and Gates. They didn't sit with the people, which is very interesting. I'm union bred. My family is union. We grew up here where my uncle started LWU. So I always tell the unions this: you represent the people, not the union. Whether you represent the union by being the head of the union, you still represent the people. Okay? So I found that very interesting. At our neighborhood board, that developer had our senator and our representatives sit next to him, and the union members went around to each community member that was concerned and was against it and had them tell them, hey, what union would you in? And sent their union rep to that person to go sit down, go sit down, go sit down. And that's how that meeting went. So you guys think about that now. Two people that was in power that we voted for sat with a developer to overdevelop our side. Okay? I was the only one, and my brother runs one of the unions. And I stood up against my brother, and I stood up against all those union guys, and that's the reason why I have not taken any union money from them, because I represent the people. This is our community, and I stick with that. Miley, I grew up with Miley. Take this, I grew up with Miley. Her dad, Fred Dodge, and Miley's mom, Karen, were both my mentors at Waianae Post Comprehensive. Fred was a physician, Karen was a nurse practitioner. I learned from them. I eventually went on, graduated, and went over to, from doing their psych tech and being a psych person, I went over to Mahalo. But that's how I started. Karen got me into a lot of the programs. And to see Miley sit with them, with the developers, and then that's how Crabbe actually came into picture. Crabbe actually was in Wahiwa, and Crabbe was invited over because Gates' person left. So Crabbe was invited over to take over his office. So Crabbe took over. Then Crabbe became a board member with us. And that was the same complaints our community is having, is that they're not getting the fair representation. That the board represents the city and not the state. And so you guys have to remember that. If you want your voice heard, it is supposed to be starting at the board first. And it is very important who you vote for, because it has not happened. It has not happened, and that's from true experience and not bashing against anybody. Gates grew up in our area. I first met Gates when he came around canvassing a few years ago, and he didn't talk to me, he talked to my wife. You know what I mean? And I had to push and says, bro, I live here too. I bought this house. My wife is married to me. Why aren't you talking to me? I don't understand that. You know? So that's just the point I come across. Anybody you put in office needs to work with our board, needs to be able to attend all board communities and put our community first. Not our pockets. Not our pockets. Okay, so you guys make that decision. That's where I sit with the board. Thank you.
For Ranson and Desiré, what have your interactions been like with lawmakers, either in this district or outside this district?
For me, in the schools, they help us in the schools. I feel like at the school level, we usually write the legislation, the bills, and they'll shepherd it for us. Some people get more attention than others. I can see the frustration of the neighborhood. I watch the neighborhood board meetings, and I can definitely see the frustration. I feel like this is why you have 6 of us sitting here. We want change. You know, things have to change, and so all of us are probably gonna call out. I give Philip credit for calling these things out. You know, here comes to this time where people are afraid to call things out, but But it's time for change. We need a new administration, and I believe that that's why we're all here. So I don't want to bash the people that have been doing the work. I'd like to believe that they did the best that they can do with what they know. But it's time to call things out already. It's time for something different, and we need these voices of change. And I'm proud to be amongst these people that are calling for a change. So that's my monologue.
You know what? Philip was hitting on good points there. I believe, I'm totally 100% grassroots. My campaign, I'm self-funding my campaign. That's how much I care about winning. But more care about this land, all my, generations from this land, and all, just all the people here, living in Hawaii. I care about our island home, but just like Philip was saying, the people who do those kinds of things should get bashed. They should get publicly shamed. There's some of us, that's a good point. So many good points Philip was just making. Some of us don't even get funding. I self-fund my campaign. So the people who are getting this slush funds, or these people who's, going on those, getting paid to do this and stuff like that, they should get bashed. They should get exposed, because you know what? A lot of times, people like that are the ones calling the shots after that, and people like us who work, hard, I'm a uni guy, it's good. Philip's making great points there, I'm glad he stood up, when he did. I was one of them that was in that board meeting about that development back in 2019. I was voicing my concern back then too. I'm not against developing, but you know what? There's so much smarter ways, green developments, green tourism that we could be doing that's not being done. We could be ahead of the curve. That's the big stuff that's selling. That's where, Europeans, and I got so much European nationalists, but, other countries with money who's got tourists that wants to spend at a green ecotourism destination rather than, a place that, is not green and not eco-friendly. There's so much smart ways we could develop, Waianae, especially for that, clientele. But you know what, moreover, I seen, just as well as, probably Philip, I've been, just like Philip, I always come to the board meetings at Waianae. When the COVID hit, there wasn't board meetings for so long. Finally they started doing them on Zoom again and stuff like that. I don't know if it's back at Waianae Gym yet. It is? Okay, good. I just wanted to ask that real quick, but it's been down for so long, it kept me away, for so long because of, all the COVID restrictions. But you know what? A lot of stuff isn't getting done. But you know what seems to be getting done every time is the big spending, the ridiculous spending, going out for rail, and rail is the big topic, guys. I mean, a fraction of that could have put ACs, computers in every classroom, air conditioners for every classroom, which is something good, something big. I'm a supporter of the teachers union, I'm a union guy myself, so I can understand how, especially in Hawaii, it's so hot, they could use the air conditioning in their classrooms, It'll help definitely keep the students, calm and collective, and not, irritable. I've been, through the years, Mr. Turbeville, good to see Mr. Turbeville over there. I had him 6th grade, I believe. But, we had some classroom days. It's so hot in Makaha. Oh, man, it was like super ridiculous hot. But, I mean, that amount of money we're spending on rail now, elevated rail, it's gotten ridiculous. I mean, we spent a lot of our profits, especially from Danny Noya's days, till now. A lot of that profits that they help accumulate, I mean, they spent a lot of it. I mean, that was we were worth like 127 billion prior to the rail. Now it's like 98 billion. The state is worth
We'll talk
today.
about money in just a second, but we'll want to wrap up this discussion
Yeah.
and kind of move on.
Right. It's just, go ahead.
I would also like to add.
Yeah, me too.
You're Austin, Tiana.
Okay. I would just like to add to that, I was involved when I was young. I was involved before I got in government, and I was involved during my time in government, and even now before and while I've been serving on the neighborhood board. And yeah, I think that it's important for people to show up. And I also think it's important for people to respect people's personal lives and boundaries, because the difference between public service is that it's very different, or the public sector in general is very different than the culture in the private sector. And so when you're in the private sector, you kind of have a bit more freedom to do whatever you want. In this case, for the neighborhood board, it's a volunteer, position. It's a volunteer board, and people have different lives. And again, when we decided to have this board or convene the board decided that it was okay for people to show up, whether it be online, whether it be in person. And I think when we make rules, when people make decision-making or policies, it's important that we treat people fair across the board, and not, if you're gonna have expectations of other people's behaviors, then it needs to be included in those types of guidelines so people can be held accountable. People can't be held accountable unless there is actual support behind I don't want to say punishment, but the consequence of what people may be going against their expectations. And so, and I also would like to note that I don't think anyone would question my attendance in the involvement of the board. A lot of people say that I'm always everywhere, and sometimes it feels like I am, because I'm being pulled in many different directions. But showing up is the minimum for me, for people, and some people like to show up, after everything's been done, after people have been calling others out, instead of showing up where the solution was needed, when the time to actually hear the people was needed. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
So just one reason why I got involved with the process and neighborhood board was the start of that. This is going back to the question, right? There was 2 measures that I was following at the time when I just recently got elected, and I questioned. I never got a response on that question. 2 months later was when finally a new staffer came on, and I don't know what you're saying. I didn't get any information to respond back. And within 45 minutes, our representative came on and didn't know the answer to those measures. So for me, it was very important to know the process and to understand what it means to write legislation and what it means when they're voting yes for reservation, when they're voting no. So there's a lot of things that community doesn't know, and that's because of the lack of communication, right? So when neighborhood board, again, is a platform for community to come and share their concerns. And we put you in contact with the elected officials. A lot of the community members that consistently come to our board already has the connections to the same numbers we have connections to. And so when there's no result, we're just as frustrated as the community. But there's still a composure that we need to hold as leaders to make sure that we're making the best decision forward. So when it comes to making agenda and people want to be on your agenda, and the amount of emails that come through every day that you got to respond to is very time consuming. But you know what? I appreciate all of that, because those are the relationships that we need as a community. For us to get things done, we need to build relationships with the people that are already in those spaces, because that's the only way we're going to get things done. If we're going to just battle them right off the start, they will make sure we will get nothing done. And I can say that I have seen that working in legislation. And that's on a state level. This is a city level. It's as easy as they don't need to answer our email, because who are we? Board members. We're not paid officials. We're not anything official. We swore in just like an elected official. But that's exactly how the people views the board, is exactly how our government officials view the board. As, oh, you're just another puppet, you're just another thing. But no, that our heart is for the community and with the community. And if we're not addressing it on the neighborhood board level, if you don't bring it to the board, we cannot address it on the board. It has to have been brought and formally presented before the board before we can take a stance on it. So I think that's the most important piece, is that we don't understand. For us to play, right? For us to play this board of chess or Monopoly, yeah, I'm using these board games as an example, we got to learn the rules. So before I got involved in any of this, I made sure and I read the rules. What it meant for me to be in the state capitol. What is the attire I have to wear to be in the state capitol? All these things is already there available to us. So rules are in place, protocol is there, and we need to follow them as elected officials. And when we don't, that is where the people can hold us accountable to ensure that the rules were being followed. And if it wasn't, then please ensure that you take the proper protocols to make sure that the rules are followed. Because that's the most important thing. That's why we see so much disconnect and corruption that we call corruption, is because we don't understand the rules, but also we're not holding the elected officials accountable. And I'm saying elected officials because we all were elected to serve on the board. So I'm including ourselves in that. So that's what I just want to leave with everyone, is that we got to understand the rules of the game before we play. Because there's a lot of things our hands is tied, we cannot do. Doesn't mean I'm not going to go over there to your church or to your place that you came with a concern and I'm going to say, well, how can I help? And that's exactly what I've been doing. Because it's important to me. All the concerns that come to us, I'm making sure I'm following up with that, because that was the reason why I got involved. I didn't get a follow-up when my son was denied to go to school. I didn't get the answers I was looking for. And that's what ignited me to do what I'm doing today. And I'm so appreciative of this journey. It's been absolutely phenomenal.
And speaking of playing the game, Civil Beat has been writing a lot about Hawaii's pay-to-play culture and the role that campaign contributions plays in state politics. So I guess this first question is to Chris. You know, you're a business owner, and you said in your candidate Q&A that you've seen some shenanigans going on with pay-to-play. I'm just curious, what have you seen?
So, you know, like with the legislator, you got to bid on work. And the new guy, I'm gonna refer to myself as the new guy. New guy shows up, I see this job, I want to bid on this job. I don't know how it goes, I don't know how the system. So I know my numbers. The state publicly gives out all of the bid results, and there's a subscription you can buy. So when you see these shenanigans, you're wondering, wait a minute, my price was lower than that one. And I'm fiscally responsible in the terms of insurance, bonding, experience, and past history. Why did he get the job? And then you go and you question and you say, oh, you got to go talk to the PM. So PM on job sites, I'm going to parallel with senator or representative, because it's who they know, who came lobbying to them, who probably gave them some type of envelope, for lack of better terms, to get the work. So those are shenanigans that I've lived through. As a business owner, those are shenanigans I've actually physically been a part of, and it sucks. It really, really sucks. Everybody talks about the cost of living in Hawaii. That ain't gonna change if we get this crookedness continuing. If the six of us sitting in front of you, we're all six individual business owners, and Mr. Keela was the customer who put a bid up, and we should all be able to fairly submit a bid that Mr. Keela would open in front of everybody. I support bid openings. Bid openings, for those of you who don't know, is a formal public opening of the bid. I support bid openings. Far too often, the awards happen behind closed doors. Now, when I can only speak of my experiences, when I know that I was fiscally responsible and the lowest number, but somebody else got the job, what am I supposed to think? What am I supposed to think? Where am I supposed to go? Right? So when Civil Beat popped that question, those are things that I would support. Transparency, absolute transparency. The state spends so much money, so much money. Let's just talk about our highways. So much money. But we got grass overgrown. We got grass growing in front of our city and county yard right here in Waianae. I brought this up so many times. We got a guardrail that was ran through in December that still sits there on the ground, unfinished, unfixed. I brought this up several times. Nothing's been done. So pay-to-play politics, pay-to-play politics is no place. Because if somebody else was involved, what would happen? What would happen? Those are the shenanigans I talked about. Lowest price, fiscally responsible, still don't get the job.
And then Ranson, Philip, and Desiree, how are you guys making sure that whoever's supporting your campaign, there's not like any sort of undue influence where they might come asking for a favor if you get elected to office?
I can speak to that. I definitely have had a lot of union support. I am a union backer. I grew up, my dad is a union member. My grandpa supported our ohana, or the raising of my aunties and uncles on union salary. I am HSTA. I believe in collective bargaining. I think that without that, the employer will take advantage of the people. So I definitely have gotten backing from unions. I don't respond to surveys that, it's a lot of them like sending me surveys, so I don't respond to surveys that I don't agree with. I think that I personally have a lot to learn too about this MacGyvering and this pay-to-play politics. Right now, none of it has felt icky. If it feels icky and I'll tell you it's wrong, don't do it. I feel like it just comes down to that, right? Following your na'au and trusting your na'au, something squirrely, something shady, don't do it. And I think that, just be for the people. So I don't understand this pay to play yet. I feel like there's some people that have a better, probably intimate understanding of it than I do at this time. But I definitely am a backer of unions. I think it's a pathway to the middle class for those that are not as fortunate.
Me? Okay, so for clarification, I am a business owner. My wife and I own Trebon LLC. We are certified with the state and city to do business with. I've actually, prior to retiring from DoD state, I was an individual who wrote RFPs for the DoD state for their IT stuffs as well as security cameras things. So I understand the bidding system. I understand how it works. When I was doing RFPs, I would have vendors call me up, let's go have lunch. And this is not about just casual lunch. They want to get favors to get, for the bids and stuff, which is totally against the law, right? They would send me gifts and I would have to send the gifts back, or I'd have to give it to other people. So I understand that pay-to-play system. It's something ethically I could not agree with. So I never participated in it. I'm retired twice. I retired from DoD state as well as I receive a VA disability. So money for them coming in, that's the part. Even if I'm a backer with the unions, they know I'm not going to give favors. Because I understand if it's not favoring the people, then it's not any good for me. So be straightforward with me, be straightforward for the people. That's what I believe in transparency, and that's what I come with. Money, my wife and I invested well enough already. So I can afford to do my own campaigning. I can afford to give back my money if I needed to, which I'm already doing. I'm already donating a lot of stuff. Myself and Chris do a lot of things with the community as well. Tiana as well. She's partners with me with a lot of community things. So we give back our pay already. So being influenced by the pay to play, even if it's an old thing, I don't play it. My dad never played it. He was a big union man with the Masons and laborers. He actually helped develop and the way it is today. And I don't believe in that. So I believe, especially when it comes down to unions, I believe as long as it benefits the people, their members, then I will back them. But if it's just benefiting the developer or the business person or developing a company, then that's something I walk away from. I watch over and I'll still call it out. What I feel is wrong and ask for that transparency. Thank you.
Well, that's a good, it's a good topic, very great topic. I brought this up in the Kupuna Council at last week at the Pokai Bay. The problem with blue collar crime and white collar crime is usually more harder, for just regular old police to go out there and, do cop work on, basically. A lot of these white collar criminals, they do things low key, envelope, tossing money around and stuff like that, which, I could say gladly, it's getting better because of technology, I didn't mention this as well to at the Kapuna Council, but I got a few good lawsuits going right now, and actually these guys are white collar. You know, they do illegal activities, don't get them wrong, and they try and lie right out in public eye, you know, but the way I'm catching them is I'm using technology against them, you know, so that's how you really catch white collar crime these days. You gotta film them, record them, you know, and you know, it's getting into that point where it's affecting business like Christem and stuff like that, you know, or, you know, just any walks of life, pay to play, you know, that shouldn't ever go, you know, or happen around, especially in our country, because, you know, our country is built on fairness, you know, and built on, good qualities that, you know, pay to play qualities doesn't fit into our, you know, our country's way of working. You know, it's been like that for many years, but it should change, because fairness is what should rule out moreover than pay to play, you know, politics. You know, fairness is what should happen, and you know what, it's gonna start coming, because when people, you know, discover, okay, you know what, we can just put these guys on record and film them, and then, you know what, win, you know, who knows how much money they'll sue for, but I mean, win big amounts of money just because these guys were breaking the laws in minute ways they thought would never hurt them, you know. So that being said, you know, it's going to be a rude awakening for people who are, you know, delving into the very, you know, murky waters of white collar crime these days. You know, you got a lot of people with eyes and phones, you know, and that's really all you need, you know, and you know, those kind of people, you know, they're going to find themselves phased out sooner or later. You know, if you respect this country and the laws and how it's formed, you know, it's really meant for, you know, the people, the disadvantaged. You know, our country is built just perfectly. You know, it's just utilizing these tools, you know, that our forefathers already put out there already. You know, so using these tools, you know, it'll make it easier for guys like, you know, small business owners and stuff like that, with having trouble with these, you know, how would you say, contracts and pay to play. You know, this guy greasing this lobbyist greasing this guy's wheels, and then he'll get the contract over a guy like Chris, who's underbidding the contract and still doesn't get the contract, you know. So I'm big on that too. I want to see less of that, because you know what, a lot of good small business owners get hurt in the process, and then you got this, you know, most of the time the guys who gets it is those, you know, big companies already who can afford the lobbyists, to, you know, stand outside the homes, or, you know, just minute things that they pay for to have the lobbyists do, you know, offer money, offer them tickets to Vegas, you know, who knows what kind of gratuity they offer them, but, you know, landing that big paycheck, that big job at the end of the day, just because the guy got voted in, you know, that's a lot of wrong. And, you know, that's actually against the law. So, you know, it's going to be a rude awakening for people, you know, involved in those kinds of things. And especially in Hawaii. Hawaii has always been like that, you know.
I just want to bring in Cross and Tiana into the conversation. You know, you both have worked in the legislature. What were some of those shenanigans you guys saw in the Capitol? And how are you going to make sure that doesn't happen in your campaign?
Sure. So, pay to play doesn't necessarily come in the form of money. And that's the honest reality. Pay to play is as simple as there's a plan, there's a purpose, and because I have the power, or I have other people's ears, I'm going to shut down that event, or I'm going to stop that from happening. And so that's one way of pay to play that happens. Also, there's a lot of great measures that come through legislation that is for the people, and it does not get signatures. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, and it's a Democrat, okay, we're not even going to look at that. If it's a Republican, oh, no, it's from who? No, we're not looking at that. And you read it, and it's exactly what the people is asking. And that's the pay to play. It's literally our lives. Literally our tax dollars is going to see that this is the process that's happening in the Capitol. And I was so disheartened by that I wanted to make sure that this session, I was out in my community to educate the process to the community, because it's important for us to engage. It's important for us to get involved. It's important for us to write measures. That is not going to be the measure that's submitted. Nobody writes a measure and it goes straight through. It goes through a drafting agency. So this pay to play is serious. Not all representatives do this. If they see something good, they're going to sign it. But there's another step. You need to get it to a hearing. They all don't get hearings. So we need to be more attention oriented and detail oriented. I had put measures that was either beneficial or controversial for our community that was introduced this year by a representative, and none of our board members read them before our meeting so we could have a discussion on every single bill. And I had to take time out of my day to read every single bill so I could bring it to the community for us to have a voice. And nobody looked at that. Nobody took the time to read it. But there was bills that never made it to the next level because nobody read it on how beneficial it was or how detrimental it was. I don't know if anybody was following any legislation, but how many of us wants to spend money on menstrual products in men's restrooms? And that's because that's what was brought to, like when I read that, and then the community was livid about that. We don't need to be spending money in those areas, but that got a hearing. So that's where I'm getting at. It pay to play doesn't happen in money form only.
We're going to talk about government spending in just a second, but Cross, just to close out this conversation.
Yeah.
No, I think it's important for people to keep things on the up and up. I have multiple, people who would testify that, me personally, I'm very against pay to play and I never participated at all. And this is where, ethics comes into play, right? People need to get educated in ethics. People need to get their certifications in ethics, all these types of things. I have, my master's in public administration, and we have to go through ethical classes for those things. And so these different types of, and it also comes with your belief system and how you were brought up. My dad's a cop, and so he always held us, responsible. Like, if you do this wrong, you're gonna go to jail. I grew up in the church. I went to my Lake Bible School. Actually, I went to all of the educational institutions I've attended have all been faith-based, and they've all, kind of, when we were younger, was kind of like, oh, if you sin, you're going to go to hell. And so that also instilled this fear of trying my best not to make any type of, not necessarily mistakes, but make the wrong decisions. And I think that's kept me on the straight and narrow path because it's hard for people to do so. And I think my record has shown that I don't participate in those types of behaviors. And I'm very open to calling that out too. For example, if people this is a common example that can be brought up in different offices throughout the state. If a lobbyist or such comes with food, we are not supposed to accept that type of things because that can also be shown as a gift. And I've declined it, directly to people's face. Certain community events, depending on the type of food it is or how much it's worth, or any type of gift and how much it's worth, it's important to be aware of ethics, because if you don't want anyone to question your behavior at all, don't give them a reason to. And so that's why people should be always aware that someone is always watching, and that you yourself have to look inside the mirror in the end of the day and be okay with what you see in terms of the decisions you made. And when it comes to pay to play politics, we've seen in recent years with certain elected officials getting in trouble for bribery and such, and especially when that situation had happened a couple years ago, that definitely set a tone of why government transparency and accountability is so important, especially when noticing people's lifestyles, how they spend their money or splurge and such, which is everyone's right to, but being aware of, where monies are coming from, how they're being spent. I think it's really important. That's why we have reports that have to be submitted and publicly produced so that people are aware of the type of spending that people, or the income people receive and the expenditures that they are making.
We'll do just two more questions, then, so you guys have time to meet the community and talk about, anything, hang out, anything. But so second to the last question, and you've also touched on it in various ways, but I kind of want to ask something a little bit more direct. In some analyses that Civil Beat has done in the last few years, it's shown that this district, the House district next to it, and the Senate district that encompasses the two House districts, often come close to the bottom in terms of capital improvement funds allocated by the legislature every year. You know, these are the funds that go to repairing schools, they repair roads, they pay for new public facilities and upgrades for them. If you're elected, what would you do to get more funding for this district?
Advocate, advocate, advocate. I'm 2018 Hawaii School Counselor of the Year, 2019 National Finalist for school counselors, and it's part of my job to advocate for kids. I always said this to my administrators, and they probably didn't like me for it, probably kept me in my corner, but I really truly work for the kids in the community and my role in the schools, and I think that I have a track record of advocacy, and I think that's what it's about, and also bringing people together and finding out what we agree upon and where, find our commonality, celebrate that, and move forward from there for a better Hawaii for all. I mean, I just wanted to answer first. I feel like mine is going to be quick. But yeah, I feel like I have a track record of advocacy from the schools in my career.
So I agree 100% with Desiree. You've got to advocate. You have to advocate. I think the one thing that if elected, that I can add is I'm not afraid to rattle cages. I'm not afraid to shake the tree. I'm not afraid to be the thorn. Because that's what the people who elected me ultimately need to do. You're right. You're 100% right. We are ignored. From that sign at the beginning of where the power plant is, this way, we are ignored. I called out the DOT just a few months ago, on simple stuff, letting us know, paint some triangles or some lines as we enter those road jumps. Simple stuff like that. We can't even get it. I called back because now they're out here lining the intersections because we know it's election year. I said, since you guys are already out there, why don't you guys improve some of the warning strips, the median strips, letting us know these things? Still nothing. Advocate, advocate, advocate. Be a thorn. Be the greasy wheel. Be the greasy wheel. I'm not afraid to be disliked. I'm not afraid to be mocked. I'm not afraid to lose a few friends. If elected, that's the job I was elected to do.
For myself, I have multiple experiences in advocating for funds. I've been on many missions in different countries as well as different states, and how to advocate for private funds, federal funds, and state funds. People think that we're neglected on this side, but we have to remember, in the 60s and in the 70s, we was nothing. Then when Uluvehi came, the canals were put in, our watersheds was put in. All of that was because of federal funds. Even if the military is the one, the Army of Engineers put it in, it was federal funds, which each and one of us who pay taxes pay into, federal funds. I have experience with that. I've experienced with end of year funds with the state and city in using unallocated funds from different programs that is out there and putting it into what we need. And that's what I used to leverage for our program, which was the only state and federally funded program, which is Youth Challenge Academy. I used to leverage all of that. It's called leverage, leverage, leverage. Funds that is available, 3 funds that we always never look at. We only look at what is available for state ledge, BS. There's federal funds, there's private funds, and there's also the military funding. They have assets and they have equipment that we can't afford to pay for, but they already paid for through our federal funds. And we need to leverage that.
Anybody can hop in.
So absolutely having the institutional knowledge that Philip is addressing, but it's not an I thing, it's a Kako thing. So what is it that the community sees that needs to be improved? That's where it should start from. The discussion has to happen from the community on where we feel as a collective, what we want, what you want me to advocate for. So it's not about I and what I'm gonna do, because I cannot do nothing in there. I need your voices to come to the Capitol or write written testimony to testify on behalf of those fundings and why we need those fundings and why it's a necessity. not a want, not a desire, but it's a necessity. So that's my commitment to community, is your engagement in how do we see our community forward. It's not an I thing, it's a Kako thing. How are we going to do it together?
Also, Ranson.
Yeah. I would like to add that, I think it's important for an elected official to be effective in how they bring funds to the community, and again, keeping it on the up and up way. And in terms of CIP projects and such, and any other type of funding too, I think, again, advocacy is really important, not being afraid to speak up, being critical thinkers in what solutions are needed to address the issues and what means to address those issues too. For example, with me being a case manager for the homeless, one moment I've had to advocate for so much of my clients to get into housing or just to receive the types of services that they critically need of receiving, for example, attending with them to the hospitals to be, treated properly and stuff, just so that they could have their medical things straightened out before being able to get into house. In my job working at the legislature, we've had to be effective in how we organize the community in receiving testimony to assist with advocating for issues, write memos, call the offices and ask their whoever the chairs are, or what they call it, purse handlers, to be able to allocate those funds to our district. And so I don't know where Uncle Tony went, but for an example, Uncle Tony earlier brought up the need that we have portables on the campus here, and how they need to either have new portables or new types of resources, or official new buildings. And so these types of things, these projects that we've helped fund, like the Waianae track and field project, with expanding Farrington Highway, with getting funds to develop our emergency access routes, all these types of things, bringing in funds for GIAs and nonprofit services are also important too. I want to say an important thing that I've learned in public administration education is that, especially in nonprofit administration as well, it's important not to keep your eggs in one basket in terms of the type of income you are receiving, or hoping to continue the development of whatever you're trying to work on. And with that, again, advocating for grants out there that the federal government is handing out, reaching out to private foundations that would love to donate, bringing, in terms of advocacy, bringing people who may not even have entered Waianae in their lives, bringing them to let them see the need, let them know that people are hurting, like real bad, and that they need the support of them to get the work and the issues done. I think that's what's important in terms of being an effective elected official.
Ranson, just to repeat the question, is about getting more funding for this district.
Well, you know what? The problem, with just how, our country is set up, the way the IRS, taxes the people and how they accumulate these funds in the first place, it's always, a challenge, especially coming to that levels. And you see it, how would you say, trickle down, to the Westside, and trickle down to the lower income areas, whereas some of the biggest tax payers in the state, like Hawaii, other big big taxpayers in the state, other places, other cities who pay taxes, they want their things first. They want stuff first before we get any piece of the pie, because we're only paying so much taxes. Only so much taxes are coming out of, these low income areas, which, our areas sometimes in most cases deserve, more of the funds. That way we can build up our areas, so it's just historically, in America, it's always been, not just racially motivated at times, but there's just a lot of conflicts, involved with allocating the funds. And you see these working class heroes who come from places like, Detroit, Michigan, and stuff like that. They're Democrats, and they come out and, they rally against the system, and they bring back, so much millions to their communities. Democrats want to see more of that, but it's just we're not fixing the real issue there of why, this one person or this one Democrat got a, rally all these people and try and get these funds for his, section of the taxpaying community. You know what I mean, right? So it's like this problems usually gets handled in upper echelons of state government, but that's not happening either. So I can see, the stress levels with everybody. It's just a very stressful topic, but that's kind of why our funding takes so long to get here in the first place. Other areas who pay more taxes want their stuff first, and most of the time we're going to get our stuff last.
The last question for you all. We'll end on one from the audience. This job, if you're elected and if you make it, the job's sort of what you make it. The job duties and responsibilities are a little loose. What would you do differently that's currently not being done now that you think could benefit the community? Just really briefly, about a minute or so.
I can go. I think that I'd like to get into the schools more, like get into the high school. Or actually, we only have one high school here in our. So definitely talk to the kids and get more civic engagement. I mean, technically, I've heard this saying a long time ago. We're borrowing the aina from the kids, yeah. And I want to educate them in what's going on. So long after we're gone, at least they know, and get them civically engaged in what's going on. Because I feel like we kind of lack that in our schools. Is this civic engagement, and letting our kids, get involved. Because we need their voices in this too. It cannot just be ours. We got to hear their generation. And the social media stuff is just kind of gnarly too, just to kind of get them away from that. And again, back to the younger ages, I feel like that happens even in elementary, intermediate, high school. I'm comfortable in front of classrooms. I enjoy that. So that's something that I'd like to bring if elected.
So you said it's kind of loose and ran loosely. So if elected, I'd run it like a business, really, where we find an issue, we find something of need, we figure out how to fix it, or how to fix that need, and then we turn around and we leverage and we advocate on how we can get that done. But even beyond that, I did want to say this. I was going to bring it up last, but since this is our last question, and I'm very glad you ended on an audience question. This is more directed towards Civil B. In the future, maybe you guys can have this whole program in the evening, because as much as we value everybody currently sitting here, we have so many more concerned citizens that would like to have made it here, but because of the issues we face, because of the high cost of living, they cannot afford to take off of work and be here. So maybe in the future, just as a nugget, issues like this we can have in an evening where we can have so much more community involvement, because there's so much more community that want to have their questions answered. There's so much more that want to ask us questions, even when we're done here and we involve our audience here. There's so much more that have questions that they want answered. And I understand you guys have time frame, but I looked at the schedule and there's other areas where you guys are doing evening times.
We have done evening.
Well, I'm just saying
we certainly will be recorded this event to make sure it is accessible and free to anybody who wants to watch.
But they can't ask their questions.
That is true, but we have experimented in the past with some events on the west side in the evening. Unfortunately, they have not done well. So we want to at least try that.
I'm not going to get into argument with you, but you've never had 6 candidates. This is a hot race. This is 6 different ideas and opinions on what could influence the votes. This is 6 different people who truly care for our community. And we should involve more of our community when question and answer forums like this.
Actually, Civil B's for dropping the ball on this one. You're right.
Okay, just to let the other candidates answer the question, it was about, what would you do differently as a candidate, as an elected official? How do you think that can benefit the community?
What would you do as an elected official?
Okay, for me, I run it the same way I've done as a military member. I was a staff NCO in charge of 7,000 Marines. Basically, my agenda and where I am needs to be accountable for all time. So I run myself transparent. You know where I am. I'm reachable by phone. I give out my personal phone number. It's always available. I give out both my personal and my business email. So that is always available. I am tethered to it. And this is a problem with my marriage as well, is I put my community first. And we all laugh at that situation because we choose something in life what is important. And family is supposed to be first. Unfortunately, for me, I've always chosen the community first. And I believe in that. So if you want to find me, you need questions, you need things to be answered, I am always available. Same as me being transparent. I just took over the chair for the neighborhood board. I run all the agendas currently through the neighborhood board currently, not for discussion because of sunshine laws, but at least to keep them abreast of what is happening. As well as community members, if they want to be attached to that and seeing what the agendas is being pushed to, and then they can see that and we can discuss as board members. But that's how I run mine. True transparency, have my agenda, my itinerary public for all to see so they know where I am. Thank you.
I would like to add, like I said before, I think one thing that I would do if I was elected is advocate for mobile testimony units so that people, again, have their voices heard. People have consistently said in all different types of platforms and forums that they don't feel like they are heard, and we need to expand and broaden, those accessibilities. It may be in different ways, just opening up testimony areas may not be enough because, again, people are lacking in the involvement, and I think it depends on the type of platform. I've been helpful in creating kapuna councils and youth or commonly e-councils, and I think it's important to have representation for different demographics because people feel comfortable when they're surrounded by demographics that they associate with themselves with, and I think that also helps with numbers in terms of advocacy and knowing what the true issues are for the people. I think civic education is very, very important. I think that's something that I would be different in doing is being very open in educating people on the civic process so that people know exactly how things work because efficiency in the public sector, I think, is what it's lacking. We spend so much time directing people to other departments when we should just be going to the departments and addressing the issues directly. And sometimes people should know the different sectors and such already. And so that's why I think it's important for us to advocate for civic education programs or platforms or systems to be able to know what to do and address things in an efficient manner. Thank you.
Mahalo for the question. So, not waiting to be elected to get these things completed already, but already having a spot in place. So I know I did mention earlier, I need your voices and your ike and your testimony to influence a lot of the change that we want to see or what we see come through as far as capital investment, funding, and things like that. And so creating, and actually this idea came from community member, and I'm just going to acknowledge who it came from because I believe in giving due acknowledgement to the individual. And so Mesana Aldegar had actually come up with this idea, and this was a vision, right, as a member of the community. How do we bring capital to community, right? And so that has resonated with me since 2022. And so already putting those things into place, there's already a location that is available for us to utilize, and because there's only select positions that is allocated for you to hire, the community liaison person would be accessible out here in the community, where there's going to be a office out here in the community for our community to access. Because a lot of us kind of get to the Capitol, especially if we work out in the community. No way we going there and coming back in the afternoon and still submit our testimony. So, and then if we commute via the bus or however we get there to and from, there's going to be the access point here in the community. So, also with the civic engagement, already working with Boys and Girls Club of Hawaii, I have talked to the principal of Waianae High School, and they're for it. But how do we get the teachers involved? So, mahalo Desiré, you're that connection in how we can engage our youth. Another conversation that was already taking place is how do we make a position on our neighborhood board for youth to participate? I know a graduate here from Waianae High School that graduated 2 years ago as a valedictorian, that before I even started serving on the board, he was diligent in attending neighborhood board meetings. And I've been so proud to watch him grow and be involved in so many areas of our community as young as he is. And different trainings that I've been privileged to attend, seeing the youth fly in from out of state. Our youth does not have, our keiki does not have the exposure that they have. But why aren't we creating those opportunities for them to be in Washington, D.C., for them to take on leadership of the neighborhood board or be the next elected officials? We don't push that on our kids because primarily we are not political people out here. And I'm not a politician. I am a public servant, and that's what I choose to be. To be to our community is a public servant that is going to be accessible, that is going to respond to your emails, answer your phone calls, and I want a team that has the same mindset and the same heart, that is going to be diligent in listening and vigilant in finding the solutions that we want and we need in this community. So that's me moving forward, is just a kako thing. I cannot do this alone, and that's the honest to God truth.
Ranson.
Well, you know, little things I would do differently in office if I was elected to this position. You know, I know one thing, you know, we got to stop the fighting, even amongst other districts, you know, and how we allocate taxpayers' money. You know, whenever money is getting spent on our people and not elsewhere, and not spending the money out of state, you know, that's always a good thing, you know. So there's definitely the need for more, you know, team player, you know, mentality, you know, and also teamwork mentality. You know, people who pay taxes in Hawaii and Pro City should feel proud that, you know, their taxpayer money is coming to Waianae, you know, so that way it can build up, you know, the less rich of us, and hopefully one day eventually build this place up, you know, to have the, you know, the infrastructure that every, you know, high income, you know, area has in Hawaii, you know, compared to, you know, other places like from Waianae to Hawaii, where, you know, a lot of our beaches don't even have rubbish cans. You know what I mean, right? There's like every rubbish can is placed like every, you know, 500 yards. You know what I mean, right? The amount of rubbish cans at our beach parks is ridiculous. There's not enough rubbish cans. It's always overfilled. That's one thing you always see on our beaches these days is trash and trash collected. There's no rubbish cans. You know, there's no big cans to be throwing all the rubbish away. You know, so they're coming out of the drain right there behind us. No, but yeah. So anyway, you know, there's definitely the need for, you know, I mean, I wanted to come up there and just like every other Democrat and start yelling at somebody, but I mean, that's not going to get nothing done. You know, we got to work together. We're living on an island. You know, we got to allocate our funds to where it's needed. You know, where our taxpayers' money to where it's needed. You know, places like Hawaii, that's a good thing. They're always well off because they got the good stuff. Now they can pass that taxpayer money on to build more stuff where it's needed. You know, simple things like I was just saying, rubbish cans and all, you know, rubbish cans at least every 20 feet. You know, that would be good. That way there's less pollution, you know, or less trash all through the beaches. We're famous for having nice beaches and there's this litter of trash, you know, but I'll pass them on.
Okay, well, thank you all for coming, and then why don't you guys give your candidates a round of applause? They did amazing today.